Hello and welcome to the After Sermon podcast, where we pick up all the bits from the cutting room floor that didn't make it into our sermons and break them down. And today, we're looking at the sermon, Rise of the Khmer Rouge. Hello, my name is Christopher, and ladies and gentlemen, you are in for a treat today because we have two very special guests with us. Joining me again is our regular co-host, Mr. Jesse Marks.
Hello, everyone.
And we also have a new guest, straight from the college campus here, Miss Kiralee Josie.
Hey.
Well, this week we are looking at quite an interesting sermon, I would say. And before we get into it, I'll just give a quick recap of what it was for the listeners at home. Just before we get into this though, if you haven't watched the sermon and you would like to watch it in its entirety, make sure to go watch it in the link below and come back here later because this podcast is full of spoilers. With that out of the way, let's get into the recap. So, essentially, the sermon begins by looking at a historical event in Cambodia, and I basically gave a detailed description of how this group rose into power in Cambodia called the Khmer Rouge. Essentially what they end up doing is they overthrow the person who's in charge, Prince Sihanouk. Prince Sihanouk is overtaken by another guy called Lon Nol, and then that guy decides to ally himself with the Khmer Rouge. And then the Khmer Rouge sort of turn their back on him, forget about him, and they become in power. And they start this really big regime that is focused on Khmer or Cambodian purity. They feel as though Cambodia at this point during the Vietnam War has been very polluted by the West, and they want to get rid of this Western influence. And so things like modern technology, medicine, education, all of that is abandoned in order to get back to a more agricultural society. And eventually the Khmer Rouge is overthrown, but what's interesting is the regime only lasted for about 3.5 years, and yet it's had impacts on Cambodia that it still feels today. For example, Cambodia is the prostitution capital of the world at the moment, and there are a lot of other things. There's immense poverty over there. Cambodia really has never quite fully recovered from this event that took place for only 3.5 years, and this is back in the 70s. So it was really interesting, and then I wanted to get people to think, well, what could the connection between this event be with the Bible? Does the Bible have anything to say about this event? And so after that, we look at Revelation 11, which is this prophecy about these two people called the two witnesses. And again, if you want more information on this, I'd recommend going and listening to the sermon because it's very in-depth and I won't be able to explain it all here. But essentially, the short version is that the two witnesses represent the Word of God, basically almost the Bible, the Old and New Testament, essentially. And there was this period where the two witnesses, the Bible, was killed in France during the French Revolution, during this period of time called the Age of Reason. And basically it was looking at the fact that this event took place in France, but what really killed the Bible was an ideology. And this ideology that spurred out of the French Revolution was atheistic communism. And so you find that the big guy who motivated this was Thomas Paine in his book The Age of Reason, and his protege was George Hegel, and all throughout these people, Sigmund Freud, Charles Darwin, who eventually influenced Karl Marx, who eventually influenced Pol Pot. So really, had it not been for this event that took place in the late 1700s, we never would have had the Khmer Rouge in the late 1900s. The Khmer Rouge was only possible because of the birth of atheistic communism during the French Revolution. Alright guys, so I want to get your impressions. What did you think of the sermon? Jesse?
Well, I had a good time with it, actually. I thought it was really fun. I mean, yeah.
Khmer Rouge.
Yeah.
Good fun stuff. Yeah.
Death.
Exactly. No. In the sense, that like you're getting a great history lesson and prophecy all in one. I mean,
Yeah.
what more could you ask for?
Pretty much.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. But no, I thought it was really good. I especially like the fact you kind of use the bait and switch a little bit as well.
Oh, I love my bait and switches in my
Yeah.
sermons.
Oh, man.
I do it. I get people to think I'm right on the edge of heresy, and they go, I'm just messing with you.
Just pull it back.
I'm orthodox, I swear. I am.
Yeah. So no, that was fun. I mean, you go on thinking, oh man, how does the Khmer Rouge fit into the Bible? This is going to be interesting. No. But no, yeah, it was a good segue into the prophecy, and no, I thought it was really well done, interesting, and yeah, good
Cool.
job.
Thank you very much.
Yeah, I really enjoyed it too. History is like my favourite thing to hear about. So like learning about it in the sermon was just next level. So I really enjoyed that, and I also liked the link to prophecy because I feel like we often really, really neglect it. And I realised just how much I don't know through the sermon. Like just sitting, I was like, whoa.
Sure,
just-
yeah.
I'm
Yeah.
learning.
Yeah, pretty much.
Yeah. Nice. Well, let's keep the ball rolling by going to our segment, The Drawing Board. Jesse, what is the drawing board?
Well, the drawing board is where we discuss the sources, inspirations, and goals of the sermon in order to better understand the sermon in question.
All right, so sources, hey? Well, basically, the way I got to making this sermon was I was preparing a lot of Bible studies for friends at school, and they were particularly interested in prophecy. And so I was going through them, and I really got on a kind of prophecy kick. I was watching any information I could get on biblical prophecy, specifically things that I didn't really know about. And in particular, I really like all of the sermons by Kenneth Cox. You may be familiar with him.
Yeah, I've seen that they're good, eh?
He's a legend. I love Kenneth. So I was going through his series, and one of them stood out to me. It's probably called Revelation 11 or The Two Witnesses, something along those lines. And I'd realized, I know a lot about chapters 12 and 13, even 14 a bit, but I've never really sat down and figured out what 11
Gone through
is.
11, yeah.
And so I listened to it, and I was fascinated. I'm like, whoa, this is real. Like,
Yeah.
you know what I mean? And I think
way.
almost if you've grown up with an understanding of biblical prophecy, it doesn't really always have that same kick to it.
That's
You
not
get what
the
I
point.
mean?
Yeah,
Yeah.
it's so boring.
Yeah,
sort of,
you're just like,
Like,
oh,
you've heard it
prophecy,
before.
like, yeah.
Yeah, sure, history, like, I don't know about you guys, but from a very young age, you're taught Daniel 2, Daniel 7,
yeah.
your basics, and as you get
Yeah.
older, Revelation 12, 13, all that good stuff. And that's the thing, it's all good stuff, but because you're kind of young, you can't really appreciate it as much.
Yeah.
And then when I came and heard this at an older age, where I was more mature and could understand it, and, you're hearing a prophecy you've never heard fulfilled before, you go,
Oh, man.
prophecy's pretty cool.
Interesting.
Why? So I really wanted to do a sermon about this now, and because it just fascinated me. And then I remember we were studying in modern history at the moment. Over the holiday break, our teacher said, okay, we didn't get to do this part of the syllabus, we're a bit behind, so I want you guys to just read these last 2 dot points of the syllabus, and they happen to be about the Khmer Rouge. This is one of the reasons I enjoy history in general. It's basically a story. That's what it is. And so as I was reading through the textbook, I was just fascinated by this story. It had like betrayal, it had intrigue, all these things, and I just loved it. And then I realized, hang on, there's a bit of a subtle connection here between that and this Kenneth Cox thing I've just read. And I did pen, pineapple, apple, pen. I have a prophecy. It's a mystery. Sermon. It was basically that. I had 2 of my favorite things here. Why not just put them together and make it a sermon? So,
Exactly.
and I kind of wanted to convey to people and try and get them to sort of understand the same enthusiasm I had for prophecy now. Because I'm like, look how relevant it is, guys. Look at, let's not forget how awesome it is. Because no other, religious text may attempt prophecy, but
Yeah.
it either does not succeed or is so vague.
Yeah,
And
it could be anything.
it could be anything.
Yeah.
Whereas the Bible goes, how about this? I'm going to give you a complete historical timeline of events. Here's where you start, here's where you end. And if that hasn't happened by this point, don't bother reading the
Yeah.
rest of me. That's basically what the Bible is telling us, and so
Yeah.
it really intrigued me, and I really wanted to get that across. All right then, let's get into the main meat of the podcast, the cutting room floor. Kira, what is the cutting room floor?
The cutting room floor is the segment where we discuss the parts of the sermon that didn't make it into the final product and break them down.
Nice. Well, admittedly, in this sermon, there wasn't really a lot that I had to cut out. I mean, I could have given a whole detailed description of the Vietnam War leading up to the Khmer, I suppose.
Been there all day.
Been there all
Just
day.
keep going.
But apart from that, there wasn't a whole lot that I didn't get to talk about. I did have to I tell you what the big problem was. With Kenneth Cox, this was probably like his, I don't know, 12th, 13th, something around there, prophecy seminar. So he'd led people through, let's just say, at least 10 other prophecy seminars leading up to this. I had to cram that into 5 minutes, like 10, 40-minute sermons, giving the basics of, as we were saying before, Daniel 2 and 7. So if you have listened to the sermon, you'll know that I pretty much give a very compact, nice little packaged version.
You did a good job as well.
Of Daniel. Oh, boy. It was tough. But... So I could have expanded a little bit more there, but if you do want to go and hear a bit more about that, there are lots of resources out there. I definitely just recommend Kenneth Cox. He does a great job expanding on those series, so there is more resources if you want to get some more information there. But what I did want to do was ask you guys some questions that you had for me about the sermon. So was there anything in particular that piqued your interest, tickled your fancy that you wanted to ask me about?
Yeah. So in your sermon, you sort of like briefly identified Papal Rome as being the little horn.
Yes.
So how should we view the Catholic Church today as sort of being that?
Yeah. Well, actually, what I do appreciate about Kenneth Cox is when he looks at prophecy, he actually makes the distinction between pagan Rome and papal Rome. So pagan Rome, he just identifies as the nation before it becomes this authoritative state, church-run state sort of thing. And so as you look at, in Daniel 7, just the big beast that's, terrifying and all that, he identifies that as pagan Rome, and then correctly, as you said, the little horn he then identifies as papal Rome. This is now not just a political institution, but a religious organization. That's the difference. It's both. And so I think what is important is to remember, there are lots of really good Catholic people, that are sincere and genuine in their belief. And I often hear people reference that verse Jesus says, I have sheep in other folds. Or even the fact that, this is probably a little risky, but that in the end times, God tells his people to come out of Babylon. Now, not solely identifying the church as Babylon, but just in general, God has people all over the place, and he identifies them as their faith being sincere and genuine, and he wants them to, be with him. And so I think, when it comes to interacting with Catholic people, I think treat them like people. You know what I mean? Just treat them like other people who are genuine in their faith. And, if you want, you can discuss a little bit about it. Get them...
appropriate.
Yeah, if it's appropriate, just have a little bit of dialogue. It probably be a little bit difficult, but I think you need to make a really big distinction between the institution and the people within it. Because when the Bible is talking about this, it's not referring to the people, is it? It's referring to...
It's the system, isn't it?
It's a system.
Yeah.
It's referring to a system. And that's what I think, we just need to keep in mind. But yeah, I don't think it's too difficult to traverse either, Just treat people like people, essentially.
Exactly. Awesome. So, when listening to your sermon, you pointed out a few things that sometimes when you apply an application to prophecy, things can seem like they fit. I mean, for example, the Khmer Rouge.
Yeah.
Same time period, it looks like it might fit, but then really does it.
Yeah.
So I'm wondering, do you have any tips or principles that you can apply to make sure that you're kind of on the right track?
Yeah, that is true. That people just... Man, researching this was fun because... I was just interested to see what other people are saying about it, because I'm not I'm not closed-minded.
Yeah.
Maybe Kenneth Cox is wrong. Who knows?
Okay.
So,
Exactly.
what are other people saying about prophecy? Because
Look around.
I don't want to be stuck in a vacuum. I want to know what other people are thinking as well. YouTube's not the place to... Oh, man. And again, there were some people who are really genuine and sincere, but are definitely just missing the principles that you asked about. And that's what is kind of frustrating, because you can tell that there's a sincerity behind it, but they haven't been equipped to understand prophecy properly.
Exactly.
Is what's the problem. So one of the common interpretations of this is that Elijah and Moses will literally come down in the end times.
Yeah.
To which I'm like, oh, okay.
If you guys want.
Where's that from?
Where's that
Show
from?
me where.
Yeah, exactly. But also leading up to that, you've got the period of 1,260 years. So are they going to be around for that long? I mean,
A little while.
It's a little while. I don't know. It's just, it doesn't quite fit. And so one of the great things that Kenneth Cox says, man, Kenneth Cox should be paying me for the amount I'm plugging him today. One of the good things he says, pretty much in every prophecy seminar he gives, he says, you can't come at it and read it and then go, hey, this is what I think it fits into. The Bible, what is good about the Bible and different from other prophecies, for example, Nostradamus, I did a lot of research into him, and what is frustrating about him is that not only are his prophecies vague, but they are impossible to correctly interpret.
Interesting.
Yeah.
The Bible gives a specific code or legend, whatever you want to call it, to interpret it. So it says, when I use this symbol, this is what it means. And it's this this principle in Isaiah, I forget the reference, but it says, when looking at the Bible, look at it line upon line, precept upon precept. Compare verses of Scripture. So when it talks about the two olive branches in Revelation 11, where have I heard that before? Back in Zechariah. So now Zechariah informs me what it means over here. Whatever it is, what does the day represent by biblical prophecy? Go over to Ezekiel 4:6. Here's what it means. So prophecy really, it's not too difficult. In that the code and the legend are given to you. It does get a little complex, when trying to place things in certain areas and when you have so many people with different interpretations. But I think if you just to look at the Bible and use that as your sole guide, it's a process that can be achieved. So that would be my advice when looking at biblical prophecy. And the other thing about biblical prophecy is it's all based upon a foundation before it. So, for example, Daniel 2 is essentially the basis for pretty much the rest of biblical prophecy concerning the end times and
Pretty
stuff.
much. It's just like a snapshot of everything.
Yeah.
It is. And what's great about it is Daniel 2 sets up a historical timeline, unlike Nostradamus, who's like, at any point in time, this vague thing could happen. And I will give you, and he says, this symbol does not represent that, or whatever. He just goes, this will happen.
Interpret as you will.
Interpret as you shall, yeah. So, for example, there's this prophecy that talks about a great orator who will make the people cry out and give... Well, who could that be?
Whoa.
Yeah, so you have people who think it's Oliver Cromwell during the English Revolution.
Yeah.
Some people think it's Trotsky during the November Russian Revolution. And some people are applying it to good old Donald Trump these days.
Yes, anyone.
So pretty much anyone in power who speaks and people disagree with is a fulfillment of... It's so vague. But Daniel 2 basically says, this is Babylon. After Babylon... these empires are going to come. This is going to be what the rest of Earth's history is going to look like. And here's like the hope at the end that the last empire will be God's empire. And you can have assurance in that because you can see all these other events taking place beforehand. And so Daniel 2 serves as the foundation for then Daniel 7. And what's interesting is Daniel 7 adds a little bit more information this time. This time we've got a little horn character. Well, that's new. But everything else is built upon that. And then when you read on in like the vision of the ram and the goat. Well, it's the same sort of stuff, but a little bit more information. And Revelation, all of it builds on the foundations of the rest of the Bible, and what it does is it just adds a little bit more information. So it goes, hey, do you want to hear a little bit more about prophecy? Oh yeah, sure. Do you want to know the context? Oh, what's the context? Oh, it's that thing you read about before.
Yeah.
So when looking at prophecy, the other good thing to do is not isolate a chapter and go, what does this mean? Like, just that mean?
Yeah.
You can't.
Exactly.
If
It's
you,
impossible.
It's impossible. If you look at Revelation 11 and not look at the rest of prophecy, you're lost.
Yeah.
Because
You know,
where do you put that 1,260 years?
Yeah.
Revelation 11 doesn't tell you, but Revelation 7, Daniel 7 and Revelation 12 will tell you, and Revelation 13. That'll all tell you, but Revelation 11 doesn't.
it doesn't.
And so what do you have to do? Line upon line, precept on precept.
Precepts.
Grab the different parts of Scripture, integrate it, and, there you go, systematic theology. You have to be able to do that in order to understand what you're reading. So, it's a process, but it's not unachievable as well.
So, I don't know if you guys have experienced this, but often you come across people with like a really bad attitude to prophecy, or they'll just be like, "No, we don't want to look at that. That's sort of scary.
Well, it
like,
can't be understood.
Yeah, we don't get that. Let's not look at that." So, do you think we sort of have a responsibility to look at prophecy?
Here's what I find funny, right? So, I'm going to get butchered for getting this wrong. I think it's Daniel 8 with the 70 weeks prophecy. And at the end of that, the angel tells him, seal up the vision. But what's interesting is when you go to Revelation 11, I'm not sure if it's specifically in 11, but in Revelation, it mentions, hey, open up that prophecy now. Referring back to Daniel, the angel gives John the Revelator a sealed vision, or a sealed scroll with a vision of prophecy in it, and he says, now is the time to open it up. We're living in the time now where we do have a responsibility. Prophecy is for now.
Yeah.
If we're not going to interpret prophecy now, when?
Exactly.
It's only useful now. When it's all fulfilled, well and done, well, what good did it do us? The idea of God giving prophecy to us now is that we're informed about what the future events will be, and gives us assurance that the Bible is true, and looking at the past and how it's achieved there. So in looking at its fulfillment in the past, it gives us hope for the future. And yeah, I think people do have a bad stigma about it because so many different people have different interpretations about it,
and wacky ones at that.
You have a lot of wacky ones in there as well. And it's the 1,260 days post-trib, pre-trib.
Yeah.
And even the tribulation period of 7 years is the last week from Daniel 8. It just gets, when you have so many people throwing their ideas in there, it can get muddy, even though it shouldn't be. As we were saying before, prophecy is achievable, but we've kind of muddied it a little bit in throwing all these different ideas out there. And so what I would advise to definitely our listeners at home is use the Bible as your sole standard and your sole filter for getting through this. Look at what people are saying. That's what I did. And then I came to the conclusion, well, this is not what necessarily fits my view, or this is what makes me feel entirely comfortable. This is what fits biblically. Looking at the Bible from a systematic approach, integrating all these different verses and using other prophecy as a foundation for interpreting this one, this makes the most sense. This is what is biblically sound. So I think we do need to kind of almost recapture prophecy, if you get what I mean, because it has sort of been lost, and it's a great tool.
It is, yeah.
I know my parents came into the church because of prophecy seminars. They heard it, and they'd never heard this before. What? Prophecy in the Bible? And so they got that oomph, that big impact that, growing up with it and as being a little desensitized as a little kid, you don't get. It really is astonishing when you think about it. So I think we do have a bit of a responsibility to tell people, especially when you consider the three angels' message. What is it all doing? A lot of it is telling about, hey, this is going to happen soon. It's a warning. And when you look more towards the end of biblical prophecy, and it gets more eschatological, which just means referring to the end times for our listeners at home, when it starts to get more to that sort of stuff, Jesus' second coming is approaching, I think we've got more responsibility now than ever to, talk about prophecy, for sure.
Exactly. Yeah. It seems like from what you're saying, Revelation and Daniel are really books for students of the Bible.
Yeah.
Like, yeah, you have to know your entire Bible essentially to understand them, which in a sense is a good incentive to read the Bible.
Exactly. Yeah. And I think what's important is the Christian experience is not one of isolation. I think what happens is when people just do this by themselves, they often come to weird conclusions because they have no one to exchange ideas and have a dialogue with.
Exactly.
We've had so many years of church history, like, maybe look into what they had to say, because you think in the 2,000 odd years Christianity's been around that some people have had some pretty decent ideas. You can learn a whole lot of stuff from people in church history. And the other thing I would say now, the other thing I would suggest is find a spiritual mentor to help you, because if you don't have a complete, full understanding of the Bible, what's the only way? The only way you learn? By finding a teacher, and it doesn't even have to be like someone in real life. It can be like Kenneth Cox if you want. Somebody who knows what they're talking about and can help you. Help you understand that. So look for what other people are saying, both in the past and in the present. Weigh it up against the Bible, and then you can begin to more understand prophecy.
I mean, people back in church history, they've looked at prophecy and they've said, oh, it's this, 100%. Like if you look back at the Great Disappointment in Adventism, and then suddenly something doesn't happen and they're like, oh, wait, what are we going to do? So they go back to that. And that's what you need to keep doing. Like, would you say, like, not get discouraged, just keep looking and, don't be afraid to have new light or new knowledge with prophecy.
Always be open to just,
Yeah, that's it. And that's what's good about being able to have dialogue. You're able to grow and expand, that faith. And if there is error, you can correct it.
Exactly.
And that's, that's ideal. We want to be, teaching the truth and not be, that. Edit.
Okay, cool. Another question. Looking through, I think it's in Ezekiel. Correct me if I'm wrong, but it talks about the day for a year principle when it comes to prophecy. I'm curious, why do you think God would put in principles like that and symbols and all these sort of things in the Bible? What are your thoughts?
Yeah, I think God uses symbols in prophecy, or just symbols in general, sort of for the same reason that we've been talking about now, in that as people study the Bible, in order to understand prophecy, you have to have a pretty good comprehensive knowledge of the Bible. And so I think what God is doing is, you sort of alluded to it before, giving people incentive to read the rest of the Bible. If you want to understand this, you have to go back and read the other parts. And so I think it's almost as though God is sort of rewarding people who are diligent enough to study and really want to get into that more deeper meaning. And so for the people who are just happy to sit on the more shallow, surfacey aspect of, reading the Bible, they'll never really get that full, rich depth part of it, And so I think what God is doing is, he does reward people for just really having that attitude of diligently studying and getting down into it.
So at the end of the sermon, you sort of linked it back to, if all of these prophecies have been coming true, why wouldn't Jesus be coming back? Because that's like the greatest prophecy, I guess. And it's, the what prophecy's all running up to, it's Jesus' return. So what should we do as we wait for Jesus to come back? And, how much longer? How much longer?
How long do we have to wait?
Yeah. Like, come on.
Well, the short answer is no one knows the day nor the hour. Jeez, what was the first part of the question again? How should we do it? Yeah. Jesus has like a lot to say about that sort of stuff, Just being vigilant is one of his big things. Be vigilant, be sober, be ready. Because the idea is he describes it almost as like a thief coming in the night. You're not quite sure when it'll come, You know it may happen, but you're not sure when, what time exactly. But what do? You put up contingencies. You prepare yourself for that time when it could happen. Most people, look at this, plug for CrimSafe. You put in CrimSafe on your door just in case the thief comes.
So the slogan right now.
Oh, if it's not CrimSafe,
It's not
CrimSafe. There we go. Our sponsor today is CrimSafe.
And the can of
And if you go onto crimsafe.com and use the code ASP podcast, you get 20% off your first nut.
Oh, wow.
Sorry.
What a deal.
What a deal. But yeah, you put in preventative measures because you know this may happen. And so the preventative measures for a Christian is to be on guard, to be aware, to be vigilant. And during that time also to help others get to that point. As we were talking about, we have a responsibility to talk to people about prophecy and let them know, hey, psst, this is going to happen. Here's how you can know why. You know, now you can prepare yourself as well.
Exactly.
You know, and if you think of the parable of the virgins waiting for
with the oil.
with the oil, so you have the 5 wise and the 5 foolish. 5 of them conserve their oil, waiting for the bridegroom, who in the story represents Jesus. They're waiting and they're patient, and the other ones they just burn all they burn it all, and they go, oh, derpy derp.
They don't have any spare. They don't.
They don't have any left. Yeah,
prepared.
they're not prepared. So it's having that attitude of being prepared and just expectantly awaiting that day. As for how soon, hey? When? Well, I think the good thing is the Bible does give us that historical timeline. And as you look through it, we are reaching that sort of closer stage day by day to that event taking place. But again, as Jesus says, no man knows the day nor the hour. Not even the Son knows. Only God the Father does. So you could say it's quite a well-kept secret. But we have a lot of evidence prior, and all you have to do is look around now as well and see prophecy being fulfilled.
Yeah,
So
definitely.
it's pretty ridiculous.
What is America?
Yeah. Exactly. So soon. That's all we can say. And
Soon, very soon.
Soon, very soon. And I think as evidenced by the past, learn from mistakes in the past, setting a specific date,
Doesn't work.
doesn't
No,
work.
no.
Not at all.
And people still do that, though.
They do.
It's like
do.
they just
Interesting,
forget. They're like, oh, just ignore that. No one knows the day or the hour verse. Like, no, I know.
Last year there was another one. It was another Day of Atonement last year.
Oh.
I know it's like an annual thing, but it was like
a 50-year one. Or
something.
something?
It was something like something like Day of Atonement and Yom Kippur had like
Yeah.
Coal
Oh, yeah, I saw that.
something like
Yeah.
that. And man, people made mad money from selling books about that. And then that day came and went, and they still kept their money. That's kind of what it has been turned into. The whole day,
grab.
The whole setting a date thing is sort of turned into a cash grab. Just like, now you have to be prepared for this specific day. Buy my book to know more.
Come to church now.
Yeah, so it's like, want to give me some money? Like, sell your stuff, and then like,
pretty much. I'll take it off your hands. You're not going to need it when the apocalypse
Don't
comes,
need your earthly treasures. Like.
Pretty much. So, YouTube. It's a bit of a cesspool when it comes to that. You don't have to look far to find people setting dates. And what frustrates me is it's so blatantly not grounded in the Bible.
Yeah.
And some of these people are sincere. Some of them aren't, like we were talking about just before. They're the cash grabber type, or just wanting to get some hype around their YouTube channel, get them subs. So it does a bit, irritate me to see that it irritates me to see that they're reaching the people, but with such skewed information that's not founded in the Bible, And there we go. We have a responsibility to teach the correct,
exactly.
biblically founded ideas.
To point people back to the Bible as
That's
their
it.
foundation.
Yeah. Keep pointing people back to the Bible as opposed to what some person's come up with in their head.
Yeah.
And that's about it.
Exactly. So, as we discovered in Revelation and Daniel, some things are literal, but there are also some things that are symbolic. And the majority are symbolic. So I'm wondering, Do you have any principles or tips to know which is which? Like I said, this could be an edit.
Which is which? Literal and symbolic.
Yeah.
Those beats are pretty hectic. Like,
Look,
Yeah.
for the most part, it's pretty obvious. For example, I had a friend who was telling me her interpretation of Revelation 12, and she thought that a literal dragon would come into power over the earth.
No. Scary
And
stuff.
like, as I say, cool, but living in that period of time
Would not be cool.
So,
Here's fire.
like, as much as the fanfic in me wants that to be true,
Don't fanfic the Bible.
Yeah.
yeah, it doesn't. It's generally pretty easy to tell what is literal, what is symbolic. Do you really think a literal dragon is going to be coming up? Do you really think that, these two people, the two witnesses, are two people who can breathe fire and cause plagues and all this? Like, the Bible is pretty clear, actually. And what is interesting, even, is that sometimes the Bible uses symbols in a literal story. For example, I beg to differ that, the throne room scene in Revelation 4, that's probably describing, a real place, and they're probably, the description of heaven and all this is probably real, but in it we've got these symbolic animals. For example, the lamb that had been wounded. Well, okay, that's Jesus. So you even got like a symbol in the literal. It's fairly easy to discern, I think. And later on, when you get into like Revelation 20 and 21, and it's talking about, to begin with, the destruction of the wicked, and then the restoration of heaven and earth, and the new Eden. Well, that seems to line up with what we read in other parts of the Bible, like in Isaiah, where it talks about God restoring the peace of Eden. So that seems pretty literal. God's not trying to convey a hidden message or anything there.
Exactly.
This is just God basically giving a chronological sequence of events. He goes, this is how it ends.
Yeah, he's given us minds to discern, so...
Yeah, so it's pretty clear when the Bible is trying to give across something literal and when it's trying to give across something symbolic. And that's also to do a lot with literary genre. Like the Book of Revelation is very prophetic, but it's also dealing with chronological historical events as well. So just understanding the genre of the book and having some, as you said, just using some discernment. Pray for the Holy Spirit to give you that discernment as well, because no prophecy came by human interpretation. It all comes through the Holy Spirit. So that'd be my biggest tip in being able to properly discern the literal and the symbolic. But for the most part, I think it's quite self-evident.
So, how much do you think is lost in the translation of Scripture?
Yeah, I read this good book called The Inclusive Language Debate, and it talked about a lot about the principles of translation. And the takeaway I got from that was this little credo: translation is treason.
Wow. I'll just go learn some Greek now.
And the idea wasn't that whatever English version or whatever translated version you read is immediately heresy. But the idea is that there is no such thing as a 100% perfect translation. The fact of the matter is we can't properly get across, the exact intentions of the author. And then you've even got this whole debate of, do you go more word for word? Because if you look at King James and New King James, they try and translate word for word, whereas more recent translations try and go thought for thought. Just try and get the intention of the author's intended meaning. And so really that's what we're trying to do when we read Scripture. We want to understand the author's intended meaning, the aim of it.
Exactly.
If you like that little acronym. And so when people translate, whether it's word for word or thought for thought, they just try and convey the message of the original text as best possible.
That original thought that God gave the prophets.
Exactly, because that's what we're trying to get, isn't it? We're trying to get that inspired aspect there. Not to say that, by definition then, translations are inspired and are of, on a pedestal. Because I know, for example, a lot of people hold the 1611 King James
Yeah.
version
Yeah.
as actually inspired.
Yeah. The only one.
The only
Yeah.
one, but
Yes.
it's just a human translation of the inspired words. So we do lose a little bit. For the example that we got in this sermon was the fact that the word Hadashah actually means like gives off light. That's the connotation, and yet we translated it as like stands beside.
What?
I'm assuming because it doesn't quite fit the rest of the narrative, like in Zechariah there, and so they just kind of went, let's simplify it, So we do lose some, and I think for the most part it's very unintentional. It's just trying to adapt it to English so that English readers understand it, because maybe if it did just say produces light, and we'd be like,
What
does that mean,
Yeah.
So I think it's good to go back to the original text and just to, if possible, understand what they were trying to get across as much as possible. But we do lose a little bit in translation. But yeah, if you do go back to the original text, it's there. You can find it. So,
Extra insight.
yeah, you can get extra insight. Yeah. But ultimately, I think when it comes to prophecy and translation and all that stuff, it really does come back to this whole idea of making sure that what you're doing in prophecy fits biblically, getting it as founded in the Bible as possible, really.
Yeah. So I guess if you think about it, you could almost look at prophecy as like a jigsaw puzzle. When you do a jigsaw puzzle, you have to get the perfect fit. But sometimes, you know what it's like. You can find this piece that looks like it fits. Maybe you can even squeeze it in and sort of chuck it in there, but it has to be the perfect fit, doesn't it? So the way I think of it, yeah, things can seem like they fit, but you have to make sure that they are the perfect fit.
So, Christopher, do you have any recommended readings?
Yep, today I'm going to recommend, if you want to learn some more about the Khmer Rouge, Ken Webb's Conflict in Indochina.
I'm looking up.
Ken Webb, yes!
What a lad.
True legend.
Definitely Ken Webb. Kenneth Cox. And Kenneth Cox, his prophecy seminars. If you just look up Kenneth Cox prophecy seminars on YouTube, you'll find them all. He's got about 20 in these things. He's really good. And our sponsor for the day, CrimSafe.
It's not CrimSafe.
It's not CrimSafe. Awesome. So, Jesse, where can these people find you?
Sure, you can find me on my YouTube channel, just called Jesse Marks.
Nice.
So, Chris, where can we find you?
Yep, you can find me on my YouTube channel as well, Christopher Petersen, that's spelled with an S-E-N, and on the podcast here fortnightly as well. Alright, well, don't forget the After Sermon podcast is now available on more platforms than ever. The podcast is now available on our YouTube channel here, but also on SoundCloud as well as on podcasts on iTunes. So make sure to subscribe, follow us on all those different platforms, and join us every fortnight as we look at a different sermon. Also, don't forget to like and follow us on our Facebook page under the same name, the After Sermon Podcast, to make sure that you get all of our updates, links to upcoming sermons for the podcast episodes, and other huge announcements that we have. Thanks so much for supporting us, guys, and for listening with us. That concludes today's podcast, and we hope you've all been blessed as we discussed this sermon, The Rise of the Khmer Rouge. Make sure to come back in a fortnight as we discuss another sermon in another episode. And with that said, have a good one, and good night.